Good evening, everyone. We are going to call the meeting to order and begin with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. We'll now have a moment of silent reflection, followed by the playing of our national anthem. Please stand for the playing of the national anthem. If we can get an adoption of our agenda for the June 23rd, 2026 regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Regis-Spagnolo, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? That carries. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Deputy Mayor?
I do, Your Worship. Through my employment, I'm bound by the CSPA through a memorandum of understanding with the Windsor Police Service Board. As such, I will be removing myself when the chief and the deputy present.
Thank you very much. Any others? Okay. Adoption of the minutes of the closed and regular meetings of council held June 9th, 2026. Moved by Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? And that carries as well. Mayor's comments, just a few. It was another busy, I would say, week or two in LaSalle, highlighted by the 38th annual LaSalle Strawberry Festival. And while the weather certainly did not participate this weekend, more than 22,000 visitors still did attend the festival, creating lasting memories with family and friends. So thank you to our volunteers, sponsors, emergency service personnel, vendors, entertainers, and especially our staff, who worked hard to ensure the festival was a success despite the less than ideal weather. As one community celebration wraps up, another is just around the corner. I am excited to invite residents to our second annual Canada Day celebration at LaSalle Landing on July 1st from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. The evening will feature family-friendly activities including face painting and games, food trucks, live music, busker-style entertainment, and a lively lumberjack show. Residents can stroll the loop, cool off at the Rotary Circle, and cap off the evening with a spectacular drone show at 10 p.m. I hope to see many of our residents there joining us as we celebrate our community and our country. In addition to these exciting community events, I'd like to share a few important reminders for our residents. The Town of LaSalle services, including Town Hall, the Vollmer Center, Event Center, Public Works Building, will all be closed tomorrow for town-wide staff training. The LaSalle Civic Center will remain open for regular activities, but the Vollmer Center will also be closed on Thursday. Residents should also note that municipal offices and the Vollmer Center will be closed on Canada Day. Full details regarding all of our celebrations can be found on our town social media page or website. I am also pleased to announce that the LaSalle Outdoor Pool will open for the season on June 28th at Front Road and Laurier Drive. Residents can enjoy free recreational swimming daily from 2 to 4 p.m., and that's thanks to the support of Pathway to Potential and Essex Power Lines. Information about swimming lessons, aqua fitness, lifeguarding programs, and other aquatic offerings can be found on LaSalle Active through the town website. And finally, there is still time for residents to provide feedback on two important community initiatives, and that's the future expansion of the Balmer Center and round 2 of the Transit Master Plan. I encourage everyone to visit the town website or PlaySpeak to learn more, complete the surveys, and share their thoughts. Your feedback definitely helps shape the future of our community, so we want to hear from as many of you as possible. That's what I have for today. We don't have any public meetings and or hearings. We'll move into our presentations and delegations. The first thing being our 2025 annual report from the LaSalle Police Service. And I will be joining our chief and deputy at the table there for the presentation. And I will turn the chair over to Councillor Carrick.
Thank you and welcome. I'd like to welcome the chief, deputy chief, and the mayor. So we will start the presentation. Who would like to go first?
All right. It is my pleasure as chair of LaSalle Police Service Board to present the 2025 annual report alongside Chief Pierce and Deputy Chief Woods. The report reflects a year of growth, modernization, and continued progress for LaSalle Police Service. It also marks the first full year under Chief Pierce's leadership and the first year of implementation of the service's 2025 to 2028 strategic plan. From a governance perspective, the board is particularly encouraged by the progress made in 4 key strategy priority areas, which is our people, our community, traffic safety, and technology modernization. The report demonstrates a proactive approach to policing. We saw significant increases in proactive patrol activities, traffic enforcement, property checks, foot patrols, community engagement initiatives, and crime prevention programs. These efforts reflect a policing model focused not only on responding to calls for service, but also on preventing crime, addressing community concerns, and building relationships with residents. Many of these initiatives are possible because LaSalle has a local police service that understands our community, knows our neighborhoods, and has the ability to focus resources on issues that matter most to our residents. Programs such as COAST, school engagement initiatives, crime prevention efforts, and community outreach activities demonstrate the value of community policing and the positive impact it has on public safety. The board has also remained focused on ensuring the service is prepared for the future through investments in technology modernization, officer wellness, succession planning, and long-term sustainability. These priorities help ensure the service can continue to meet the evolving needs of our growing community. I'd also like to recognize the members of LaSalle Police Service. Behind every statistic in this report are dedicated officers, civilian staff, dispatchers, volunteers, and leaders who work every day to keep our community safe. Their professionalism, compassion, and commitment to service are evident through this report. I'd also like to thank my fellow board members, Vice Chair Anita Riccio-Spagnolo, Dan Allen, who has since left the committee, and we have Garth, and I'm forgetting his last name, Little, thank you, who has joined us since, Morris Browse and Marie Campagna for their dedication, thoughtful leadership, and commitment to ensuring the residents of LaSalle continue to receive high-quality policing services. On behalf of the board, I'd also like to thank Chief Pierce, Deputy Chief Woods, and all the members of their service for their outstanding work through 2025. And I'd also like to thank council and the residents of LaSalle for their continued support. With that, I will turn it over to Chief Pierce to provide an overview of the report.
Thank you, Mayor Meloche. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the 3 officers in Ontario and Quebec that were killed in the line of duty in the last 2 weeks. That's 5 officers in Canada killed this year. So I want to acknowledge their sacrifice before I begin. I'd also like to thank the members of the LaSalle Police Service and the LaSalle Police Services Board for their commitment and effort in 2025. Without them, the results in this report wouldn't be possible. So I'm going to skim over some of the highlights. If you have specific questions, please feel free to ask, but in the interest of time, I'll be skipping some pages. So the highlights you'll see on the screen, I'll see if I can make that bigger for you. We responded to 16,518 calls for service. That's an increase of 59%. That's broken down into reactive calls and proactive calls. You'll see that we had a 29% increase in reactive calls and a 142% increase in proactive calls. We had 180 arrests, which is a 31% increase, 352 criminal charges, which is a 13% increase, 70 ride programs, which is a 1,300% increase, 189 foot patrols, that's in parks, trails, businesses, schools, which is a 3,680% increase. One of our priorities is traffic enforcement. We set a target in our strategic plan for a 25% increase. We doubled that with a 53% increase. And then property checks increased significantly as well, as you'll see. One of the, two reasons for the increase primarily is focused effort, but also we're getting better at capturing what we do. When I arrived, our officers were often doing things that we weren't recording, if you will. So we were going to schools in the morning to monitor traffic, and we weren't necessarily recording that. So we are now doing a better job of that, which is why we see an increase of numbers. But it's a combination of both of those for both of those reasons. I'll talk more about response times, but you see that from start to finish, on average, every call in LaSalle is we respond within 12 minutes and 32 seconds. And I'll get into more of how that breaks down. That is a good response time by Ontario standards. You'll see crime stats on the following 2 pages. I'll gloss over that, or I'll pass over that unless you have specific questions later. Here's the breakdown of our traffic enforcement. 1,794 tickets and summons, which is a 63% increase, and then a 46% increase in our warnings to drivers. Our impaired driving stats are up significantly. We made about over 4 times more contacts with drivers in ride programs than we did the year prior, and almost 2 times in 2023. I've provided a list of top 10 collisions. That seems to be what people are interested in. You'll see that we don't have any particular intersection that dominates as far as collisions go. Last year, you'll note that I provided you with stats on time of year, weather conditions. I didn't provide that this year because it's the same. Most of our collisions occur on dry roads on sunny days. Most people think that occurs on poor weather and snowstorms, and that's not true. So in our criminal investigations division, we had noticeable increases in most categories. The number of occurrences investigated. You'll see the number of arrests has increased, the number of charges has increased. I'd like to explain that these are cases that our crime unit had from start to finish. Our crime unit often helps our frontline with a multitude of cases, but the arresting officer or the officer laying the charge happens to be a frontline officer. So in these numbers, it's not reflected there. So the true value of our crime unit is also felt on the frontline significantly, but these are cases that they were directly involved with from start to finish. In relation to bail compliance, for the last 3 years, LaSalle and Windsor has a joint bail compliance team that's funded through the provincial government grant. That grant has now ended, but for the full year of 25, we saw increases in bail compliance. And so I've itemized it according to Windsor and LaSalle combined, and that's the top row. You'll see the numbers there. And then the bottom row is LaSalle specific. So clearly there's more offenders in Windsor, and our members get the benefit of working in specifically to bail compliance in a higher frequency investigative and arrest, mechanism in that unit. So our members benefit from the learning that's occurring with that partnership. We have 16 people that are registered sex offenders in LaSalle. That's an increase of 3 from last year. We had 1 person move into LaSalle. We had another citizen that was convicted and as a result entered the sex offender registry. And then a 3rd person was living in Windsor, partly living in LaSalle, like family members in both towns. And that person has now registered in LaSalle and living in LaSalle. So that explains the increase, but we have 16 sex offenders in LaSalle. With respect to use of force, our officers used force 14 times. 3 times a firearm was discharged to euthanize an animal. 3 times officers drew firearms to effect arrests. 5 instances of displaying a conducted energy weapon, so not deploying it, but actually showing a person. There's 2 methods. You can actually deploy it by shooting prongs at someone, or you can just essentially push a button on the side to make the electricity show. So it's an overt display use of force, and normally we get compliance that way. And in these 3 cases, these 5 cases, that's what happened. We didn't actually have to deploy that on a person. And then we have 1 instance of deploying a conducted energy weapon, and then 2 instances of empty hand techniques. In 2025, we received 5 complaints from the Law Enforcement Complaints Agency, or rather 5 public complaints that were filed with the Law Enforcement Complaints Agency. 2 of those complaints were screened out, deemed not in the public interest. That was done by LECA. We had 1 that was withdrawn by the complainant, but then I elected to proceed with that complaint by a chief's complaint. And then there were 2 that were investigated and found to be unsubstantiated. In 2025, I initiated 2 internal investigations, which were called chief's complaints. Both were minor in nature and both were resolved informally. We had 0 occurrences involving the Special Investigations Unit in 2025. With respect to training, our officers and our civilians participated in 7,518 hours of training in 2025. From our Emergency Communications Center, so in addition to the 518 calls, we had calls for service for LaSalle Fire and Kingsville Fire, totaling 17,542 calls, which is an increase of 55% from the year prior. With respect to response times, you'll see on the screen that I've itemized the average time it takes for each stage in the call process. And so the second last column is the total response time. That includes the time that a citizen speaks to our dispatch, the time it takes for an officer to acknowledge a call, then be en route to the call, and then arrive on the call. So that amounts for 12 minutes and 32 seconds. And if we were to cut out the time a member or a citizen speaks to dispatch and go from the time the officer's dispatch to arrival, it's 5 minutes and 36 seconds. So that accounts for every call for service that LaSalle had last year. Some people may wonder, like 3 minutes and 30 seconds for the time to an officer to acknowledge a call. It could be that that officer is already on a call and has to preempt it. It could be that officer is on his or her lunch and being preempted. They could be at the station doing paperwork, and the time it takes them to finish what they're doing, get in their car and hit the button to acknowledge the call. So on average, we're responding to calls at 5 minutes and 36 seconds, which is an excellent result. Our records management, we're seeing increases in paperwork on the back end, or the non-front facing part of our police service. Freedom of information requests are up, police criminal record checks are up, pardon requests are up. And obviously we process every ticket and traffic summons, our civilians do. So because we're producing more that way, our folks behind the scenes are doing more work there. I also want to acknowledge we had 8 retirements last year. Jay and I were joking about how many years of service that we lost in that 1 year, and we haven't done the math, but it's probably a few hundred years of service. So I want to acknowledge that represented a 12% turnover of our staff in 1 year, but also we lost some tremendous people to retirement. So we want to acknowledge their service. There are a number of pages that address our strategic plan that you may have read or can read at your leisure. We've made significant progress in year 1. I'm proud of the progress we've made and the work that our people have done. Seem to be frozen. There we go. And the last thing is our finances. As previously reported about a month ago, we were about 3.6% over budget at $372,673. Some of that is due to funding deficits that we're working on, anticipated collective bargaining accruals, and overtime. And I'll note that in 2025, we lost 14,289 hours. as a result of illness, injury, maternity, and parental leave, which is the equivalent of 7 full-time employees. So that is my presentation, and unless you have any questions,
Does council have any questions? Okay, Terry, or Anita and Terry?
To the chief. A response time of 12 minutes. How does that compare to other jurisdictions? Again, people who have full-time services. Are we average, above average, below average, or outstanding?
it's actually difficult to gauge because a lot of police services don't report the response times. And it's something that the Inspectorate of Policing is addressing. They're doing a province-wide review, or pardon me, a province-wide inspection of that, on that issue. So police services don't necessarily measure the response times in the same way. And it starts with how, I would imagine we measure our response times overall the same way, but when you start to parse according to priority, different services will identify priority ones differently. And so when we compare, I can give you anecdotal information, but I wouldn't be able to provide you statistical information because I don't have a big enough sample size. But in a conversation with a member of an advisor with the Inspectorate of Policing, he advised that some nearby jurisdictions are looking at 18 to 19 minutes for response times for priority ones. And so this is all our calls. But again, this is anecdotal. I would have to take a really deep dive and try to find data, but it's not that easy to find.
Thank you for that and the response of the officers.
Okay, Anita?
Thank you, through you. Just a comment to Chief Pierce and Chief Deputy Woods. Thank you for your leadership. You guys have done an incredible job just with your community engagement, your RIDE programs, your Lock It or Lose It program, to everything that you do in the community. It definitely doesn't go unnoticed. So again, just a big thank you to you and your department for everything that you do. To have that police force in the town of LaSalle, we're very grateful and very fortunate to have that. And I just wanted that to be on record that we appreciate you and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. And Councillor Byrne, in response to response times, so this includes all calls for service. So if we had a bylaw complaint, obviously that's not a, it doesn't require an immediate response. So some of our calls for service are going to drag that average response time higher as a result of lower priority. Or on days when we are dealing with higher priority calls, lower priority calls will sit until we deal with those calls. So that will skew that number higher.
Thank you.
Councillor Segan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, by the way. A lot of good information. The one question I had is kind of dovetailed into the question about priority calls. So my understanding is that from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, what constitutes a priority call is different, or is measured differently, or is labeled differently. It has a different meaning behind it. And if so, it was seeming to be very difficult to compare jurisdiction to jurisdiction when they were presenting data that is basically apples and oranges, because it's not really codified by the same way. Would you care to comment on that for the LaSalle residents so they understand what that means?
Certainly, and you are correct. And this is I believe, one of the goals of the Inspectorate of Policing. And for those that aren't familiar with the Inspectorate, they've been around for about 2 years. And their goal is to, I believe, standardize policing in the province as it relates to things like response times. So they're about to conduct a province-wide inspection of police services to determine how we're measuring that, so that I believe, although they haven't explicitly stated it, I believe their goal is to the best of their ability, standardize that. And so what that will look like, I can't say, but I believe that is their intention.
Thank you, and my thanks too for the whole service, for the duty that they do for the town of LaSalle. Much appreciated.
Okay, so I just have a quick comment. So I've been born and raised in LaSalle. We've had our own force since I can remember before my time. I will say one thing, and I tell anybody who'll listen: when you make that phone call, you know we're coming. And there's no better feeling than that, knowing when there's extreme situations going on and our guys are on the way, or our women. So thank you for that. Okay, so there's a recommendation that the 2025 LaSalle Police Service Annual Report, as presented by Mayor Crystal Melange, Chair of LaSalle Police Services Board, and Michael Pierce, Chief of Police, be received for information. Do I have first, Councillor Reynolds, second, Councillor Burns? All in favor? That carries. I will turn the chair back over to Mayor Meloche.
Okay, we're going to move into our staff reports and correspondence for council's action. H1 is our 2025 audited financial statements. Our manager of finance, Mr. Ferraro.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. The report before you, along with its attachments, presents the town's 2025 financial statements for your approval. These statements reflect a strong and stable financial position supported by healthy reserves and manageable debt levels that remain well within prescribed limits. The financial statements have been prepared in accordance with the Municipal Act and represent the town's financial position as of December 31st, 2025. They are prepared using the accrual basis of accounting, which differs from the cash-based used in preparing the municipal budget. Ms. Denbach is here from KPMG to present the audit findings report, and following her presentation, we're available for any questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Meloche, happy to walk council through the highlights of the audit findings for the town of LaSalle for the year ended December 31st, 2025. I'm going to start on page 4 of our report, so referring to the page numbers at the bottom right-hand corner. First of all, just want to say the reason for providing this report to you, it allows us to fill our communication requirements under Canadian auditing standards and provide you with information we feel is important for you to be aware of as you conduct your external governance role over the external audit process. So one of the items I want to highlight on this page is the top right corner, which is materiality. So materiality is the highest level threshold scoping that we use to determine where within the financial statements there might be a risk of material misstatement. And we use that to really drive and scope the procedures that we're going to perform. But the more important number to point out is the audit misstatement posting threshold of 156,000. That is the level at which, if we do identify any audit adjustments, we would bring them forward to you through this report. And you can see in the little boxes below here, we have no misstatements that remain uncorrected and just one corrected misstatement that was identified during the year that has been fixed in the financial statements that are in front of you. And I'm going to move along now to slide 6, which is the status of the audit. So as of the date we prepared this report, being May 29th, there were a number of items outstanding. Happy to report at this point in time, we have completed all of these procedures. The only items that remain outstanding are having our conversation with council here this evening, obtaining evidence of the approval of the financial statements, at which point we will send a standard management representation letter to be signed, and we anticipate being able to issue a clean or an unmodified auditor's report. Page 7 goes over the one significant risk that we do identify in the audit, which is the risk of management override of controls. This is not something that is specific or unique to the town of LaSalle. It is a risk in every single audit that we perform. And we do have certain procedures that are built into our audit methodology that allow us to address this risk. So happy to report that there were no significant issues identified through those procedures and nothing to report on that. I'm going to move along to slide 10, which goes over the corrected audit adjustment that we did identify relating to the depreciation of some assets that should not have been depreciated. So that, as I mentioned, has been corrected in the financial statements in front of you. Page 11 goes over the definition of control deficiencies. So anytime we do identify an audit adjustment, we have to consider whether there should have been or could have been a control in place to prevent or detect that misstatement. And so on slide 12 here, you can see we do have a suggestion, which would be the review of newly capitalized assets to ensure they're being amortized over the correct period. And then the other item we've brought forward is a bit of a carry along from previous years with respect to journal entry reviews. So we do note that management has a process in place to review journal entries, and we did observe that during the year, with the exception of the month of December, as management was waiting until final sign-offs were performed before conducting that review, and so we just note that as a deficiency there. And those are really the items that I wanted to highlight in our audit findings report. So not a huge amount of findings, but happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Members of council, do you have any questions or comments? Councillor Rena.
Thank you, Your Worship. When you talk about the control deficiencies, and you said that many municipalities, if not all those municipalities, that comes up in their audit because of your procedures. Is there anything that you leave each council with as a suggestion that would make it better in the eyes of the auditor? What types of things are we looking at? We can appreciate if we didn't have any issues come up as a result of those deficiencies, but what types of controls are you looking for to take that off our audit next time?
Through you, Mayor Meloche. In this case, the significant risk that I noted, management override of controls, one of the ways that we address that risk is through the testing of journal entries, just by virtue of the fact that management in any organization might have the ability to override controls that would otherwise appear to be operating effectively. And so that's where we always look to the process over journal entries, and to ensure that especially for significant dollar values or unusual journal entries, that there is a second set of eyes on those. So the biggest control that we recommend always is just a secondary review. So if you have one person who's sort of preparing the information and preparing the journal entry, you have another person who is reviewing it and approving it.
I can appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? There being none, the recommendation is that the report of the Manager of Finance, Deputy Treasurer, dated June 2nd, 2026, FIN-2026-13, regarding the 2025 audited financial statements be received, and that the 2025 audited consolidated financial statements for the Corporation of the Town of LaSalle be approved. Mover, Councillor Reno, support by Councillor Segan. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you, Ms. Stenbach, for attending. Appreciate it. Item 2 is our Oliver Farms interim control bylaw. And so we are going to start with our delegates this evening. If you want to come forward to the table, I have Ms. Perry, and I don't think it's 2-0. So is it? Okay. All right. If you two want to start with your presentations, and then we'll continue on from there. Okay.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, members of Council and Administration. First, regarding all of this, I would like to thank administration for the time and effort that went into preparing this report in response to our petition. We do appreciate the quick turnaround and opportunity to continue this discussion. After reviewing the report, I do believe there remains a significant disconnect between what the residents were attempting to achieve through this petition and what administration believes we were requesting. From the beginning, our objective has never been to stop growth, prevent housing, or oppose additional residential units. Our concern has always been infrastructure capacity, reliability, and the condition. The petition was submitted because the town's own studies identified infrastructure concerns within Oliver Farms, including limited stormwater capacity, the aging infrastructure, incomplete recommended improvements, and water mains that are now identified as being at the end of their useful life. We have struggled to understand how additional intensification continues to be encouraged while those concerns remain unresolved. There also appears to be a disconnect regarding the meaning of infrastructure. When we are referring to infrastructure concerns, we're primarily referring to the water, the drainage, sewer, all the essential services that are supporting our neighborhood. Throughout the report, there was significant attention being given to sidewalks, curb gutters, street lighting, and complete urban cross sections. And while those are technically forms of infrastructure, they were never the primary focus of our petition outside of any safety concerns. I personally have suggested removing sidewalks and other urbanization features while providing alternative safety options on many occasions, if doing so would reduce the costs and allow resources to be focused on the systems that directly affect the drainage performance, servicing reliability, and infrastructure capacity. What has been frustrating is that we continue to receive different messages from different departments. On one hand, we have town commissioned studies identifying the infrastructure deficiencies, recommending future improvements, acknowledging that funding is required to address them. And then on the other hand, we're being told that current modeling supports additional intensification and no further review is required. I experienced this firsthand at a committee of adjustment hearing in October of the past year when another lot split was being requested in this neighborhood. And at that hearing, I did reference the town's own 2017 Stantec report, which identified the existing drainage system had limited capacity and was susceptible to surge charging and ponding during larger storm events. Yet the engineering in that meeting advised that modeling confirmed the system could accommodate the proposed development. So it's difficult to understand how both of the positions can be true at the exact same time. That's why we continue to ask questions. Most of us are not planners, engineers, lawyers, municipal administrators. We're just homeowners, taxpayers, and families trying to understand how these decisions affecting our neighborhood are being made. So reviewing the materials, comparing reports, and understanding the history of the infrastructure decisions has taken a substantial amount of time, but we're undertaking this work voluntarily because we care about our neighborhood and we want to ensure that decisions are being made with all the complete information. So my purpose tonight is not to criticize administration, just to seek clarification where there's still questions, right? So my written delegation does contain a more detailed review of the report, but I do want to highlight two of the most important questions that I have. First, if the report concludes that modest intensification can continue, what is the tipping point? At what point does this modest intensification become too much for a system that the town's own study described as having been substandard drainage with limited capacity? And second, if no further review is required, how have the 26 to 29 additional dwelling units already added in this neighborhood been incorporated into the modeling that administration is relying upon today? So without those answers, we're being asked to accept conclusions without evidence. I do acknowledge that administration has concluded an interim control bylaw is not the appropriate planning tool, and while we may not agree with that conclusion, we have attempted to work with the provincial and municipal frameworks that are available to us. If the interim control bylaw is not appropriate, additional zoning restrictions are not recommended, additional review is not required, and the infrastructure upgrades are not currently funded, what is the solution, essentially? Because the answer cannot be to simply continue to develop and hope that this system holds. From our perspective, it feels like every proposed tool is being dismissed while concerns that brought us here in the beginning have still remained unresolved. This report offers no evidence demonstrating how the additional lots and dwelling units added over the last several years since the original reports have impacted the infrastructure or how they've been incorporated into the conclusions being presented today. Sorry to be blunt, but offering resident-funded urbanization upgrades is not a solution because we're not asking for urbanization with sidewalks or beautification projects. We're asking for basic municipal infrastructure, which is reliable water service, proper drainage, and roads that are safe to drive and walk on. And I do not expect residents across the entire town to pay for sidewalks in my neighborhood. But I do expect that no additional development should occur until water mains are replaced, drainage issues are addressed, and infrastructure improvements discussed for years are completed. And I understand funding takes time and these projects cannot happen overnight. If it does take several several more years to fund these improvements, then so be it. I understand development charges have been collected from the new builds, but if these 26 to 29, sorry, I forget the actual number, but additional dwelling units have already been added into this neighborhood, and there is still no funding available to address the drainage concerns that have been identified nearly a decade ago, then continuing to rely on additional development as a solution doesn't appear to be working. Administration does keep saying that the system can accommodate modest intensification, but please show us how you reached that conclusion and how you quantify modest. Because if the infrastructure improvements identified nearly a decade ago still haven't been completed, we deserve to understand where that threshold is. Please do not continue adding a strain to the neighborhood that is still waiting for essential service improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perry.
All right, I can go. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Malash, members of council and administration. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. So I've spent a lot of time reading reports, attending meetings, talking to neighbors, and trying to understand what is happening in Oliver Farms. And after reading administration's report, I keep coming back to that same feeling. I don't think residents and administration are having the same conversation. From the beginning, residents have not been asking for luxury upgrades. We're not asking for fancy streetscapes. We're not asking for decorative improvements, and we're not asking to stop growth forever. What we're asking for is much simpler than that. We're asking for confidence that the infrastructure serving our neighborhood can keep up with the changes happening around us. When I read this report, what stood out to me wasn't what administration said about the interim control bylaw. What stood out to me was that administration agrees our infrastructure needs major work. The report says the water mains are aging. It says our water main breaks are increasing again, and it recommends moving forward with engineering design because replacement and rehabilitation is needed. So if we all agree that major infrastructure work is necessary, why is it unreasonable for residents to ask for a temporary pause until we can get this work to catch up? That is the part that I can't reconcile with, because from a resident's perspective, we're being told two different things. We're being told the infrastructure is good enough to continue intensifying the neighborhood, but we're also being told that it needs millions of dollars in rehabilitation. Those two messages don't seem to fit together. Another thing that concerns me is how much reliance is being placed on studies that are now approaching 10 years old. The flooding study was completed in 2017, and since then the neighborhood has changed. There have been severances, there have been new builds, and there have been additional residential units. There are more driveways, more roofs, more hard surfaces, more runoff than there was when that study was completed. And honestly, the weather has changed too. Many residents don't look at weather forecasts anymore and think, I wonder if it'll rain. We think, is this going to be that storm? Because when we've watched water collect in the same places over and over again, it stays in the back of your mind. The report says stormwater improvements identified in the environmental assessment still haven't been completed because there is not a funding source. And that's what worries people, because to residents, drainage isn't an enhancement. It's not a luxury. It's part of the infrastructure that protects our homes. I also want to speak about the history of Oliver Farms. One thing I've heard repeatedly from council over the years is the importance of preserving what makes LaSalle special. Whether we call it our small town character, our sense of community, or our local history, those things matter to residents. Oliver Farms is part of that history. This neighborhood was established under the Veterans Land Act after World War II. It was one of the oldest neighborhoods in LaSalle. It's part of the story of how this community grew. And a lot of that history has already been lost. The Herb Gray Parkway changed this neighborhood forever. Homes disappeared, land disappeared. Parts of Chelsea, Surrey, Grosvenor, Eastbourne, and Montgomery were permanently altered. Whether those changes were necessary or not, they cannot be undone. Once something is gone, it's gone forever. That's why so many residents feel so strongly about making sure future decisions are made carefully. We're not trying to stop change. We're asking council to make sure change happens thoughtfully. Because once neighborhood character is lost, you don't get a second chance. I also think it's important to recognize that infrastructure isn't just pipes underground. It's how people actually live in a neighborhood. Montgomery Drive is currently a bus route. We have children walking to parks down that road. We have seniors walking along that busy roadside. We have buses, construction vehicles, parked cars, cyclists, and regular traffic all using Montgomery and Eastbourne, and they were never designed for the volume and activity they see today. Those are real world conditions that residents experience every day. At the end of the day, I think this comes down to one simple question. Should infrastructure follow growth, or should infrastructure lead growth? Because right now, many residents feel like we are being asked to trust that everything will work itself out later. The interim control bylaw request was never about stopping growth forever. It was about pressing pause long enough to make sure we're heading in the right direction. To me, that doesn't sound unreasonable. It seems responsible. I respectfully ask council to consider whether a temporary pause on further intensification while infrastructure planning and rehabilitation move forward is really such an extreme request, because residents aren't asking you to stop growth. We're asking you to make sure the neighborhood can support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, both very well said. I appreciate you taking the time to come. I'm going to ask administration real quick if there's anything else they need clarified before I welcome administration to the table. If there's nothing, thank you very much for the presentation, and I'm going to have administration come over for their presentation to the table. Thank you. So just for everyone understands, we have Gudrun Beggs, who's our Director of Planning Development. She will be presenting the report along with Jonathan Osborne, who's our Director of Public Works, and Dale Langlois, who's our Director of Finance.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Malash and members of council. As council is aware, we've received a request for an interim control bylaw and site-specific zoning amendment. The objective of the request, as we understand it from the petition documentation, is to conduct a review of infrastructure capacity and the land use planning permissions. The petition has a total of 137 signatures, which includes 87 homes. The figure to the right outlines the limits of the Oliver Farms subdivision. And so the petition is very clear, as we understand it. It states no zoning changes, lot severances, new built forms, or intensification proposals should proceed until the town confirms through engineering analysis that existing infrastructure can safely and adequately accommodate such development. So that's the language in the petition, and so that's our understanding of the intent. Next slide. Thanks. So for additional background for council, we undertook a review of the planning approvals and building permits issued within the last 5 years. And as a result of whether it be a severance application or a building permit that was issued, and that totals 21 new residential units in the Oliver Farms neighborhood within the last 5 years, the location of which builds are outlined in green on the air photo to the right. It would include 4 new single detached dwellings, 10 semi-detached dwelling units. However, we have to consider in the context of net new, given that there was previously a single dwelling home located on some of those lots. So that home was demolished to make way for a semi-detached unit. 10 additional residential units, which equates to a total of 21 units in the last 5 years. So that's just some additional context for council information. And so the report and presentation are outlined into 3 sections. It is a multidisciplinary report. When council received the petition a few months ago, they were correct in asking for a report that crossed different departments. It was a collective effort between myself, Jonathan, and Dale. And so the first component of the presentation will draw on the land use planning items. It will discuss this whole notion of what an interim control bylaw is and when and why particularly it is triggered. Jonathan will focus on the engineering and infrastructure components of the report to explore the infrastructure capabilities within the Oliver Farms neighborhood and highlight for council how him and his team go about approving severances or new builds within the existing subdivision. And then Dale will take us through some of the financial implications and funding mechanisms to particularly explore the different funding opportunities and mechanisms between infrastructure replacements and infrastructure enhancements. And so an interim control bylaw is a tool under the Planning Act. And essentially, it's a tool used to temporarily pause or restrict certain types of development so that the municipality has some time to study the issue and determine the appropriate long-term planning approach. So it typically happens and is initiated by administration on behalf of the municipality when there's an identified policy gap or a missing piece of technical information that's clearly absent. And so an interim control bylaw is enacted to give administration some time to complete a study to address that missing gap. So that's really the intent of the tool under the Planning Act. It's typically in effect for a year with an option to renew for additional year. So that's typically how the tool is applied. And the legislative requirement and precondition for the interim control bylaw is very specific. So the legislation states Section 38 of the Act requires that council identify the need to complete a defined municipal planning and servicing study necessary to trigger the interim control bylaw. So there has to be a very specific and defined need, something that needs to be studied in order to pass an interim control bylaw. And the justification rationale is that it avoids premature development and allows time for this technical work to occur to address the missing policy gap or the technical information that has been identified to be missing. And so the implication in the petition, as we understand it, is that new development should be paused until such time as an infrastructure study is undertaken to assess servicing capacity limits. So that's the study that the petition identifies is missing. And so what administration would like to stress to council is that we have a very solid framework, a solid foundation of documents that we rely upon for guidance to make both planning policy decisions and engineering and infrastructure decisions. And I won't go through the list in its entirety here. I'll only touch on perhaps the official plan and the zoning bylaw from my perspective. But these are the documents that we rely upon to make informed decisions about development in the municipality, including the Oliver Farms neighborhood. The 2018 official plan document was a comprehensive update that was updated from the former OP, which was adopted in 1997, I believe. And so as you can appreciate, over the course of time, provincial direction has changed quite a bit. Provincial interests have changed. And the legislative test for an official plan review is that the OP and municipalities are required to be consistent with provincial policy, provincial directives, and provincial interests. And so one of the really important policies within the PPS is that it suggests municipalities have to provide a very broad range of housing choice. They have to provide a very broad range of housing supply options in order to address affordability needs. And so that provincial directive at the time was taken quite seriously, and it was incorporated into the policy framework for housing in the OP in 2018. And so council approved the OP on the strength that it was consistent with the PPS, in particular, the direction related to housing. And as we understand today, provincial direction has not changed. Every single legislative amendment that comes forward through the ERO has some sort of initiative related to housing. And the current legislative climate encourages more homes, streamlining approval processes, and ensuring that municipalities enhance and increase their dwelling unit supply within the capabilities that are offered to them. And so what we did in 2021 is we adopted a new comprehensive zoning bylaw. And what the zoning bylaw did is it took the policy direction from the official plan related to housing specifically and integrated that into the zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw is a legal instrument. And so it took the policy direction and the policy framework that was established in the OP at the time, and it codified those in laws. And what that said and what that meant was that all the lands in either the R1 zone or the R2 zone within the municipality, so town-wide, would allow both singles and semi-detached units. So Oliver Farms is an R1 zoned category. And so singles and semi-detached units are permitted as of right in that neighborhood. And that was a deliberate decision made to reinforce the direction in the official plan. And so items 3, 4, and 5 are related to servicing capacity that really outline sort of the servicing capabilities, the infrastructure capabilities that we have in the municipality. And they're the overarching guidance documents that Jonathan and his team use to make informed and sound engineering decisions as it relates to new development proposals. We also have the Oliver Farms Heritage Estates Flooding Environmental Assessment, which Jonathan will talk a little bit more in detail in a few minutes. And then, of course, the asset management plan, which is continuously updated by Mr. Langlois and Mr. Osborne in consultation to ensure that it reflects and contemplates the infrastructure that we have within the municipality. And so what administration is suggesting is that this is a very robust list of studies that we rely upon to make informed land use planning and engineering decisions. It's, for all intents and purposes, quite current. We do update the studies regularly to reflect new development that is contemplated in the municipality. And so we're not in a position to say that there is an identified policy gap or technical information that is missing in order to be able to trigger an interim control bylaw. It simply wouldn't meet the tests under the legislation. So with that, I will pass it over to John. Talk to council more about infrastructure in Oliver Farms.
Get me in trouble for that one. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, and to the delegates for their information and conversations along the way. So I'll get right into the servicing part of it. When an application comes in for a severance or an ARU, there is an engineering review that is part of that process. So we look at things like sanitary, storm, water, grading, driveways, roadways, all of those things. I'll touch on a couple of the underground infrastructure things here to begin. So when we look at the sanitary sewer system, it is a closed system and one system that functions townwide. So it's one entire system functioning together. We have a good handle on the inputs and the outputs of that system, and we are able to kind of conduct a modeling and review of that system with a standard set of engineering principles. Same with water. It's one townwide system that functions together. We know the inputs for the water system. Again, we're able to model that in a certain way that we can do it on a townwide basis. So we do that on a regular basis, that modeling, roughly every 5 to 10 years. We look at the build conditions at the time, capacity, possible growth scenarios that may come up. And then when the next revision of that modeling might come to be, that will capture some of the built form that has taken place over the previous years. So in all of our farms, there's no capacity or pressure or flow concerns for those two systems in all of our farms. When we look at the storm system, the storm systems in the town function much differently than the sanitary and the water. So as opposed to like a singular closed system, the storm systems are a number of various catchment areas or smaller local systems. They each have unique characteristics like outlet locations, outlet conditions, stormwater management approaches, pipe sizing, elevations, grading, things like that. On top of that, the inputs and the outputs are much different than that of sanitary and storm. We're dealing with weather events. So different catchment areas or different storm systems are designed to different size storms. So usually depending on when that system went into place or was built, will kind of let you know to what level it might have been designed for, or what storm level it might have been designed for. So each application that we get for an ARU, wherever it is in town, is reviewed in the context of what system they're part of. But with that, every area in town is always susceptible to the risk of flooding or the risk of a storm coming along that is greater than that which the system is designed to. Whereas in water and sanitary, it's much more restrictive and we have much more control over the system. When it comes to the storm system, it's really something is put in place at the time that is built. That is what we kind of design and review to. And at some point in time, that system may be overwhelmed. And when I say overwhelmed, that might mean the sewers are full, the roads are flooded as they're intended to flood to a certain extent. There may be water in backyards where rear yard catch basins are. So in all of our farms, modest intensification can occur while still falling within the context of its design parameters. I'm going to touch a little for the next couple of slides on the EA from a few years ago. So back in 2014, 2015, there was a couple large storm events that did inundate and overwhelm the system, and there was road flooding and some basement flooding. And it was really the basement flooding that we received we received calls on all, but there was more basement flooding than we were used to have seen over the years. So we initiated an EA to look at options for reducing the risk of flooding. Things that we looked at were the severity of the storms, existing infrastructure and design levels, storm pipe investigation via camera work. So we did camera work on our storm systems as well as private storm systems when residents called to ask. So if they had concerns or basement flooding, we would set up a camera investigation to check out their private system to see if there was any deficiencies there. And then finally, the EA looked at possible mitigation measures. Coming out of the EA, I categorized that large report into kind of 4 basic items here. The first one being maintaining, improving, or repairing issues on the private side. So this might be things like cracked storm pipes around the foundation or a cracked foundation, grading towards the house, potentially old field tile that might run into the foundation, run towards the foundation walls, things like that, where there's a connection. There's a hydraulic connection between the inundated storm system and potentially the basement walls. The second item is an enhanced stormwater management levels for both Heritage and Oliver, which consisted of a dry pond and underground storage in Heritage Park. The third one is rerouting storm sewers within Heritage Park to provide a more efficient conveyance network for both systems. And then lastly, which we'll talk about in a second, is the install storm sewers and reconstruct Oliver Farms to a current urbanized cross-section. So items 2 and 3 were completed, I believe, in 2019. This is the dry pond and underground storage in Heritage Park and the rerouting of the storm sewer. This part of that recommendation had net benefits for both Oliver Farms and Heritage Estates. We also did receive a grant to carry forward with this work. Since the work has been done, our team has not received any flooding calls in Oliver Farms. Not to say there hasn't been water sitting in ditches and roads, and I did get the material from the delegates with pictures. Not to say any of that didn't happen, but we haven't received formal complaints about basement flooding or things like that since this work was carried out. This chart here is kind of a general, looks at general infrastructure items and categorizes it into kind of replacement or enhancement. So on the left, you have the replacement items like existing pavement, water main, sanitary sewers, ditches or culverts, and streetlights. So these are items that exist and that we have accounted for through our asset management plan and would fund through reserves. On the other side, we have enhancement items, which would be, upgrading to a full road cross section, curb and gutter, sidewalks or trails if there aren't any, storm sewer enhancements, and streetlight enhancements. So these are all enhancement items that we currently do not have funded. And just a minute on the existing water main. So as we all know, it is an older cast iron main from the 40s. We have experienced many breaks over the last 15 years. This chart here, it's broken into 5-year segments. And the reason for that is in around 2015, 2016, when the parkway was being constructed, an additional water main was installed along kind of the interface between the parkway and LaSalle to help create a more looped system. So it tied in kind of the water mains along the way to make it a better loop system. What this did, it did reduce the number of main breaks immediately after that for a few years. But as you can see, over the past 5 years, that number is trending back upwards. And we feel just kind of due to the age of the infrastructure, and we are at the time where we should be replacing it. Just want to note though, if replacement of the infrastructure is for the purpose of the age of the infrastructure, not out of a need for capacity. And then the last slide here, the last chart, fairly large. And what this is if we go back to the item 4 I mentioned before, the full reconstruction of Oliver Farms, it lists out the items, the infrastructure items within that. The first column with numbers there, and these are high level estimate costs, not exact costs, but just to give council kind of an order of magnitude of what we were looking at. So that would be the cost to do the full reconstruction of Oliver Farms that's recommended in the EA. So we have a total there of 24.7 million. Of that 24.7, approximately 7.7 was like a replacement portion funded through the asset management plan and reserves. The remaining 17 million is enhancement work that isn't currently funded. The next column over, I'm not presenting it as an option, but it's there as I know it's come up where a lot of the residents in Oliver Farms have said we don't really want the sidewalks or the curb and the gutter and things like that. So what this column is the EA solution minus the curb and gutter, the sidewalk, and streetlight enhancements. So as you can see, it still is quite a large cost of $20.8 million. Replacement portion 7.2, and a non-funded amount still remains of 13.6 million. The third column is strictly replacement of the existing water main and the existing asphalt, which is what we're recommending tonight to move forward with. And it's all replacement costs, and there is not an unfunded portion of that. With that, I'll pass it over to Dale for the financial section.
Thank you. Okay, so just a little bit of background information. So the town's infrastructure reserves, excluding development charges, are used to fund the replacement of existing infrastructure included in the town's asset management plan. Our asset management plan doesn't include any enhancements whatsoever, whether it is upgrades for storm sewers or street lights, sidewalks, and whatnot. It takes into account replacement like for like. And at this point in time, as presented during the budget session, the asset management plan is 65% funded. So we're working towards getting to 100% funded. We're in better shape than a lot of other municipalities, but as you can see, we still have 35% to go. Luckily, the majority of infrastructure in the town of LaSalle is fairly new, so we have time to continue to build that up. So this map here, it kind of outlines the roads in the town with curb and gutters and without curb and gutters. So you can see the Oliver Farms area right here. They have no curb and gutter, and that's pretty representative of the roads that wouldn't have storm sewers, that would have ditches for drainage. And then over here, and we call it Older LaSalle, which is east of Matchett Road. So that's the other big area of town that does not currently have storm sewer either. That's approximately 79 kilometers of roads without storm sewers in the town of LaSalle. So just on that, you know, when new roads are built, with the design standards of the day, full urban cross sections with curb and gutters, that additional cost has to come from somewhere. So as developers build that cost goes to the property cost for the builders. If they're going to build a house, they pay for that. And then correspondingly, when they sell that to the people who move into the residences, they pay for that. So that additional cost to construct a full urban cross-section type road is paid for by the residents who live in those houses when they're built. Theoretically, if you take two equal sized lots with the same house and you have one with the full urban cross-section road and one without, MPAC's going to assess that value of the house with the full urban cross-section higher. They're going to ultimately pay more taxes, which ultimately goes towards funding the replacement of that infrastructure. The road, if it has curb and gutter, it'll replace the curb and gutter, it'll replace the storm sewer, whatnot. The neighborhoods in the town of LaSalle without the storm sewer and that infrastructure, their taxes theoretically go to the reserves to fund the replacement as is, not upgrade. So regardless, an upgrade is an upgrade. Regardless if it is a sidewalk with streetlights or just a storm sewer. An upgrade is an upgrade, but looking back at this here chart that Mr. Osborne prepared, there really isn't a significant difference between the two. The most expensive part of the upgrade is the storm sewer component. So in Oliver Farms, if we replaced the road and went forward with storm sewers, that is still significantly expensive. The $7.2 million is included in our asset management plan to replace. So the water main and the road, that's replacing the existing assets. The upgraded component is very expensive. There has to be additional work done to the road and whatnot. 13.6, now these are high level numbers, but they're not going to be far off. $13.6 million is not, there's no funding for that anywhere in our asset management plan. So with that being said, if council chooses to move forward and upgrade, whether it's with just storm sewers or curb and gutters and sidewalks and whatnot, there's basically three options. One is to fund through municipal tax rates and continue to apply for grants. We have applied for many grants as outlined in the report. And, you know, the focus of the province right now is on growth. Historically, like at this point in time, there's really no grants that this qualifies for. But with that being said, if we did fund an upgrade through municipal taxes, that would set precedent for the other areas in town east of Matchett Road and the other areas that don't have curb and gutter and storm sewer. And to maintain a 65% funded asset management plan, we need an immediate 17% increase in our tax rate, which is very significant. And we'd still only be 65% funded. There's other options available as well. They're very similar. One, you know, okay, I kind of talked before I got to the slide. So that option's not recommended to fund through the tax rate. We're trying to build up our reserves to replace what we have, and not upgrade on top of that. The second option is a local area improvement charge. So Oliver Farms residents may initiate a local improvement by submitting a formal petition to the town requesting enhanced works. The town would manage the project upfront, the construction costs, but the upgraded portion of the project would be funded from the residents. And there's ability to repay that over a number of years, and it'd be placed on their tax bills. But with that being said, if you look at the other page and do the math, $13 million, there's 130 households. You can do the math fairly quickly. That's extremely expensive for the residents. Charges would be applied to the tax bill, and it'd be a financial impact on those residents for the upgrades. The next is a Part 12 charge under the Municipal Act. It's similar to a local area improvement charge, with the key difference is it's council initiated for the area charge. There's more flexibility on how to distribute the costs amongst the residences in that neighborhood. It's the same allocation principle as a local improvement charge. So with that, the recommendation is to deny the request for an interim control bylaw and site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. Move forward with an updated detailed engineering design for replacement of the water main and existing road rehabilitation at a cost of $100,000. Provide a project cost to council for consideration as part of the 2027 capital budget. And if it is approved in the 2027 capital budget, tender and construct in 2027. And with that, we're available for any questions.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of information. I will start with Councillor Carrick.
I just need some clarification around the water mains themselves. What kind of dire straits are they in?
Not dire straits. We have a number of breaks annually. It seems to be consistent the last couple of years. We have to go follow our procedures, fix the water mains when they break. It is due for replacement, but dire straits is not an accurate way to describe them.
Okay, so I guess what I'm getting at here is doing something rather than nothing is better than nothing. So if that was to be replaced with the road covering being done at the same time, that's covered. So we wouldn't have to worry about the extra $13 million or $17 million at this point. Now, it was mentioned by the presenters that they might be willing to wait a little bit of time, over time, but how much time would you actually need to bring back a report that would cover everything to make sure that was included?
With the cost for the enhancements, I don't know that there's a period of time where we'll be able to come up with the funding for the enhancements. As Mr. Langlois said, we're only 65% funded on what we actually have today. So to go beyond, we're not even at 100% funded, to go beyond and now do upgrades, I don't think we'll get to that point as far as I can see. So thus the recommendation to move forward with the water main.
So the water main money would come from the water main replacement fund? Is that my understanding? We put that in place many years ago just for something like this, right? Am I correct in understanding?
Yep, that is correct. And there'd be a portion of that project, we would tie with that project a full depth mill and pave. So there's a portion of that would come from the roads reserve.
Okay, so understanding that this would be a huge cost and flip it over to budgets or whatever, that would still be an item that wouldn't take away, would take pretty much everything and then some away from everything else at this present time. But again, myself, I'm more concerned about the water main itself and the road, and if funding comes up down the road, definitely keep it on the front burner, and we could look at maybe doing some enhancements on top of that. But something I think needs to be done sooner than later as far as the water main goes. That's my opinion.
Councillor Segan.
Through you, Mayor Meloche. A couple of questions here. What's the elevation of Oliver Farms in context of the rest of LaSalle? Just curious.
It's at the high end of LaSalle, but LaSalle is fairly flat. I think, was it Pete, 30 feet over the east to west? That's all we have in fall from the east side to the river is 30 feet. But it's
Okay.
at the high end.
Another question. You mentioned the fact that there are a number of breaks in the lines there, especially in the last 5 years. Is that correct? Where are they exactly? What do they look like, and what's the impact that they have?
Well, it's not convenient for anyone. I'm not going to lie. What the impact is for a short period of time, the time it takes from when the break starts to when we have it repaired, it could be anywhere from 5 to 24 hours, depending on the break or the complexity. But sometimes we're able to do it depending on where it is, fairly isolated and not affect too many homes. Sometimes we do have to shut down a section of main that might affect homes. It really depends on exactly where it happens. But it's been scattered throughout the neighborhood. I don't think there's one spot in particular. It happens more than others. I think Eastport and Montgomery probably have a bit more, but I think every street's had water main breaks.
Okay, further question?
Yes, if we can, sorry, keep the chatter down so we can hear the conversation going. Councillor Segan, go ahead.
Does a recommendation deal with that problem?
Yes, replacement of the water main would
Okay.
rectify that problem.
And just one anecdotal comment. We can't afford to add more taxation to the LaSalle residents. I mean, 17%, I mean, even half of that, or even a quarter is still really hard for a lot of residents. So I think we got to keep that in mind when we make our decision today. That certainly can't be an option, in my opinion.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for, it's probably going to be just simply based on faces I remember. Perhaps Mr. Mara, we had a meeting here when we were talking about flooding and water mains and the Herb Gray Parkway a number of years ago. And I specifically remember because I had relatives that lived at 4935 Chelsea, and they were here. And so I just want to understand what, if any, provincial responses from those meetings that I'm sorry, I couldn't find my notebook from that meeting. But those meetings and the impacts and the things that we discussed, and I'm sure, Mr. Mara, you might remember, so you can help me better understand where we are today and if other entities have some responsibility that we could reach out to help our residents.
Thank you for the question. Yes, the joys of being here for 15 years. So I am the familiar face with respect to this project. When I started here in 2019, the Herb Gray Parkway was, 2010. The Herb Gray Parkway was just starting under construction. Mr. Hayes was in charge at the time. He was very adamant in pushing the province to put in measures to solve drainage problems. So there was a lot of work back and forth with getting permanent solutions put in place. Unfortunately, at the time during construction, those permanent measures weren't in place. So during the time of construction, we were always battling with interim conditions where it was problematic. So when this study occurred, when we had the flooding and we initiated the study with Stantec, it's actually in the report. It talks about the Herb Gray Parkway, and there's actually an extra cost that we paid to Stantec to go in and review all the drainage work as part of the Herb Gray Parkway on our behalf. So we did it internally, but we then hired Stantec as part of that report to go in and confirm what was built and how it was built, that it meets the intent of them capturing their own water. So when the parkway was completed in its entirety, they have implemented a lot of the solutions that they said they were implemented, and that has been confirmed through Stantec at the time when they did the report. We specifically asked for that extra work to occur at that time because there was questions about the parkway causing some of the concerns. So we want to make sure that we were able to check that box saying we're comfortable with that solution. So through their analysis, Stantec at the time did that solution. So what is implemented today is the permanent solutions that were proposed, that their engineer signed off on, and our engineer also signed off on, confirming that they were in place. Again, there was always going to be potential problems during construction. We dealt with those along the way, but since the time that it was completed, the permanent solutions have been in place, and they are doing what they were proposed to be doing.
Supplemental, Your Worship, and again, I'm sorry, Mr. Marr, can you remind me about what some of the construction, was it drainage? Was it drainage and water? Was it just, where did it go? I'm sorry, I remember the meeting because it was probably the largest meeting we had. We had 147 people here, but I can't remember, and since I don't have my notes, I just want to make sure that I understand where we are today from that meeting, sir.
A lot of it was the surface water runoff. That was a lot of the concerns. No one was really paying attention to what's happening underground because at that point, all that underground was in place. That's why the surface was so destroyed and disrupted, because they went in and did a lot of the underground, but they didn't do the final restorations in a lot of locations. For instance, when you look at Chelsea, the elevation of the highway top of the tunnel top is a lot higher than Chelsea. So there was, at that point in time, there was a lot of surface runoff coming from that tunnel top down the slope and into our right of way, or it was the ministry's right of way at that point, but it was going into our systems. We had the same concern at Heritage and St. Louis Parkway. They were building hills everywhere because they needed to dispose of materials. So we were very adamant that when they got through that stuff, but it was really, a lot of it was geared towards surface water runoff, and it was just the nature of interim conditions during construction, and we worked our hardest to make sure that we were trying to minimize that the best we could at that time. And the permanent solution, like I said, the permanent solutions have been put in place, and I don't believe that that's a concern today. I haven't heard anything since it was completed relative to that type of stuff. So again, I'm still thinking that those solutions are still working.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Reno?
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things that I was wondering about is the work that we did do for drainage, because drainage seems to be an issue, whether the water's standing on a front yard or backyard or on the road. And one of the questions was answered because I personally have not taken any calls about a basement flood in Oliver Farms in the last 8 years. But I took a lot of calls about basement floods in my first term. And we saw, as the deputy mayor said, over 100 people come down here about basement floods. It was horrible. I mean, people were bringing like rotted pictures of their loved ones that got stuck in the flood and that are no good anymore. And that led us to the EA, which then led us to some corrective action. And I can appreciate that not everything in that report was done, but I can also appreciate that a lot of the things that were done in those first 2-3 steps seem to be substantial. The disconnecting of downspouts, the cammering, the free cammering to the house system, those are all things that identified problems, and some people were able to get them fixed. And all those little things, as well as that dry pond, I haven't even gotten a call saying I tried to bring my kid to play soccer and that field was full of water, which is what it's designed to do in a big rainfall. I haven't even gotten a call about that, and people would complain about that, right? So I have to believe when they say that, you know, the pond has helped, and all the work we did in that first stage has helped. But again, when we start looking at, you know, $13 million shortfall, it's substantial to go in and to put in those sidewalks and to put in all those things that were never designed to be there in the first place, right? So I don't know that we can put that on the rest of the town to pay and upgrade all this, because I used to live on Lafferty Street, and as was said, if we put curb and gutter in for you guys, right? Hold on. Okay.
So
You're asking us to pay for us to upgrade our infrastructure to meet.
So I appreciate it, but let's just try to keep sorry, that's okay. Let's try to keep this under control and continue with the conversation. We'll address each of the concerns that we hear. So if you want to finish your comments, and then we'll keep going.
Okay, I'll finish my comment. I am very happy that the town is willing to jump ahead of the curve with the water main replacement. We all got the calls, we all got the emails of when every one of them broke this year. And we knew, and it was actually addressed in meetings before the petition came forward, that we would have to do something. But at no point did we say we're going to throw $100,000 at it right away so we can get these reports faster so that we can deal with it next year. So I can appreciate the engineering department coming forward with that request to get the ball rolling faster for you, as opposed to waiting the normal amount of time where we would wait until budgets, then we would give the money, and then it would take another 6 months. So I can appreciate that the steps that they've taken to open up those not enhancements, but those repairs that are so very much needed, because the water main is a huge issue up there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Burns?
Your worship, first to administration, thank you for the alternate solution. And we're able to move forward with that. And certainly the residents, there's 100 homes there. You're talking $1.3 million per home. You can't afford that. We can't afford to put it on the rest of the taxpayers. No, Sal, I think that would be unfair. But to move forward with what we have today and what's been presented, I think is a fair and honorable compromise for both of us. And I think it alleviates your main concern, condition of the roads and the water. That's what we can do today with $8 million. And unless an airplane flies over LaSalle and Doug Ford gives us $13 million, it's not happening. So I'm prepared, if I let anybody else speak to it, to make a motion to move forward with the proposal that has been presented by council, by administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any, Councillor Cheswignola?
Yeah, thank you through you. Just I'm echoing my fellow colleagues. I think it is fair that you had come up with the $100,000 solution. I do have a couple questions though. If future council approves this in budget, you had stated that it would start in 2027. What would be the timeline for that project to be completed? Thank you.
Yeah, so if the 100,000 is approved tonight, we would be begin working on detailed design, as our consultant would be able to fit that into their schedule. Again, this isn't a project they kind of anticipated for their year, but we would try to get at least a tender ready to be ready in the spring. And hopefully if it's approved at budget time, we can tender and begin in the construction season of 2027. It's a large project, but I think it's 95% of it would be completed in one season, I feel like.
Any other questions or comments? No? So I just have a few. I know you both had a presentation. I took notes from each of you to make sure I was able to address some of your concerns and with what I heard from administration. So Ms. Tuzno, you said that there was a disconnect regarding infrastructure capacity, and I'm hoping that was addressed tonight. You didn't feel it. So maybe, Mr. Osborne, could you talk about the capacity just so they can understand how that works?
So I think we always have to break them into the three separate categories: water, storm, and sanitary. They all function differently. They're all on their own systems. Water and sanitary are similar in that they're a town-wide system with more prescribed, I'll call them, inputs. So we have a better handle on what's going into the sanitary system based off the number of houses and the types of housing forms that we have. Same with water. It's a closed system. We know how much water we're getting from Windsor. We know how much water we're using based off of meter usage. Like we have a very detailed account for that. When it comes to the storm system, there is not a town-wide storm system. There's a bunch of different storm systems that are all function very differently. So a brand new subdivision with a nice big storm pond is going to function much differently than some of the stuff in Old LaSalle or Oliver Farms. It's going to function differently than an area that might be partially agricultural and partial some subdivision or some rural residential. So they all function very differently. So when we talk about modeling, we can more easily do a townwide modeling for sanitary and water because of the way they're set up. For storm, we're relying on the design that was done at that day that's what we have to work with. We can use what is in that design and with some of the assumptions that are in there. We could use that when we have applications for this modest intensification. And I agree, there's no definition for the word modest. We're seeing what comes in, reviewing it appropriately, and approving it if we can. If it is to a point where we don't feel comfortable with it, we wouldn't be approving them. So I hope that maybe answers that question about capacity. But again, with the storm system, the capacity let's step back. With water and sanitary, we know we have capacity and the system is not going to get overwhelmed. With storm, each system is going to get overwhelmed at some point in time. You can never have enough capacity for all the potential storm events. So we really, no place in town has infinite storm capacity. We have to deal with the design parameters that are in place at that time.
And I agree with that comment. I'll use my own neighborhood as an example. Sorry, we don't go back and forth. Sorry. I know, I appreciate it, but we have to go through the process of how a meeting's conducted. So we gave you your opportunity, and then administration gets the opportunity, and then we have to have our conversation. So I'm just going to continue on with the comments that I have first. And like I said, I use my area as an example. I live somewhere that was built in the late 70s. I have curbs and gutters. However, there are multiple times in a year that our street floods. And it's kind of expected with certain storms, and slowly it drains away, and then that's how it's kind of handled. So when we talk about Oliver Farms specifically, I think that the thing that is interesting and needs to be kind of realized is the cost that you're asking for is an upgrade. It's not replacement. Replacement is what you currently have. And so when we talk about taxes paid, it's for that asset management plan that we were talking about, that's 65% funded. So that's the funds that would go in and be able to replace the items that you currently have. You said yourself, you don't think it's appropriate that residents in the town of LaSalle should have to pay for an upgrade to your neighborhood, and I agree. I wouldn't expect Oliver Farms to pay for an upgrade over off of Lafferty or those areas. That brings us to the ultimate problem, which is there was 4 suggestions in that report. 3 of 4 have completed. Number 4 was a minimum of a $13 million upgrade that's not funded, and the only options we have available for funding is taxing our residents as a whole, keep applying for grants, or the residents of Oliver Farms pay for it, which is not a realistic number for anyone. So it leaves us at the crossroads that we're at today, which is making a determination of the things that we can do. And the things that we can do, number 1, which we are made well aware of, while it's not in dire straits, it is time to replace the water mains and that infrastructure. And that's what I believe council's in agreement with tonight, is to move forward with that $100,000 to be in that study. And then the next council come budget, which budgets this year are in January, they'll get a chance to review what's submitted, and hopefully they approve it and move forward with that. We understand there was a disconnect when you said curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and that's why that was presented in that way. So you could see if we remove that, we're still talking about $13 million of unfunded. And how do we get those funds? And like I said, those options were laid out, and none of them are acceptable, right? Unless we keep applying for grants, and that's what we're going to keep doing. We keep trying. But as stated, the provincial government has been very clear. They're not looking right now at, repairs or replacements. They're looking at new homes, building faster. And so they don't have any money going towards that, but doesn't mean we're not going to stop applying for it, because we know it's important, and we know it was highlighted as item number 4 in that report. But just because it was highlighted doesn't mean that we can do it. I think one other thing that was mentioned by Ms. Perry, you did talk about the bus route, and we had the open house last week that I think you were able to attend. So hopefully that was part of the conversation. I know we've talked about routes, and I don't know if there's any changes exactly to that area. But I've also taken your concerns to police as we've had conversations about speeding through the areas, and we've heard that we've had some issues there. So they're well aware of it as well. So we're listening to everything you're saying, and we appreciate it. But there's some things we can do, and there's things we can't do. And what we can't do is pay for $13 million we don't have, and we can't put that on the residents. So that's not an option. So I think at this point, I did have a mover, Councillor Burns, had moved the recommendation. And the recommendation is, and I'll read that out so everyone knows, that the report of the Director of Planning Development, the Director of Public Works, and the Director of Finance dated April 22nd, 2026, PW-2026-21, regarding the Oliver Farms interim control bylaw and site-specific zoning requests be received, and that council declined to adopt an interim control bylaw and site-specific zoning amendment for the Oliver Farms neighborhood, and that council directed administration to advance engineering detailed design work at a budget of $100,000 for the Oliver Farms water main and pavement rehabilitation to be funded from the Water and Roads Reserve, and that council refer the project construction cost of the Oliver Farms water main and road rehabilitation to the 2027 budget. Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Councillor Regis Spagnolo, and all in favor of that? And that carries. Thank you very much for attending, and any more information will come out, be shared with the public when it's due. Again, budget time. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. So consent agenda. So if I can, sorry, maybe Ms. Beggs could answer that question for you real quick, and talk a little. Yeah. Yeah, if she can answer those questions for you, she would be the best one to ask. Okay, you're welcome. All right, so our consent agenda has 6 items on it. Are there any items anyone wants to pull out and speak to specifically? No? Motion to receive? Councillor Segan, and support Councillor Reno? Okay, but are you supporting?
I was concerned that Mike was up for
Yes, okay. That was a long time ago. All in favor? That carries. Committee matters. So we had County Council highlights June 3rd, 2026. Any questions or comments regarding the County Council highlighted? None. Just a motion to receive those then. Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? That carries. Any questions or statements by council members? Councillor Carrick?
I have one statement. So we've actually was at a function last night, and a couple of residents came up and said, "I know we're still a long process to make this happen, but they were really impressed with a lot of the social media that we put out and how we're working hard to get stuff out to the residents. It's not perfect, but the 2 items that they had worried about in their own neighborhoods, they were well aware of before the meetings and what was going on. So they're very appreciative, and the social working or the social network is very much appreciated by these people. So nothing's perfect, but at least that's, some positive news. Thank you.
Councillor Burns?
Yes, I have basically 3 questions. One is, resident contacted me that there's snakes along the trail and there's no signs there. How would we get a sign, or who do we contact to put a sign in that area that I can direct this resident to? Is that, I thought Parks and Recs?
Which trail, what location, what kind of snakes are we referring to? Are they dangerous? Are they not? Again, I think there is a lot of information out there already. If you can pass that information on to the Public Works, and we can take a look to see what that is.
That's number 1. Thank you. Number 2, it was, and I've got it from 3 or 4 different seniors, not enough parking at the event center, which we know. But I guess my question to administration would be, where do the vendors park? Obviously, some of them in wheelchairs can't go in behind the bank as they were directed to and push the wheelchair all the way to the front. So I don't need an answer on that, but if we can find out, if we have it, I would gladly refer that to these 2 young ladies. If you have it, if not, I can wait till for an email or.
Thank you for the
Ms. Barry.
question,
Thank you.
Councillor Burns. I think you're talking specifically about the Seniors Expo that happened last week. The vendors are asked to park last week there were some vendors that were parked behind the event center. And then they are asked to park over at, by the boat launch or behind the TD Bank. However, that event was very well attended. And so, there were some times maybe where people weren't able to find parking. But it is not because the vendors weren't asked to park elsewhere. I think it was just the popularity of the event and the number of people that were attending at one time.
Thank you, and I'll bring it up at budgets if I happen to be here. Next was a response to a resident about Sandwich West Public School. And they made the response included parkland. But do we not own parkland there that can be converted to parking for that school across the street?
Are you saying Sandwich?
No, the one over,
The high school?
yeah, no, and off of Mayfair or whatever over there. The
Oh,
South
South
Public.
Public, okay.
South Public School, sorry. Because I know at one time when we built that school, we couldn't get the teachers to park across the street. We couldn't get the teachers to do anything. We offered them the parkland, and they weren't willing to even park if we built them the parking lot across the street. So I guess that'll probably take a little research, but I still think we own a piece of property there that can be converted to parking if we want to.
So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Mara because we have been in conversations with the board and I believe they do have a meeting next week. But Mr. Mara?
Thank you. LaSalle Public is an interesting location with the school being on a dead-end street. With it being a newer neighborhood and being centrally located, walking to school was a great thought, but that's not what happens. And unfortunately, that is what is occurring out there. The land across the street on Mayfair is owned by the school board. It's not owned by us. So they are in complete control. We did make a proposal to them that we would look at something like what you suggested, converting that to a park, building a parking lot. They can use it. They turned that down. So we can't do anything with that. This has resurfaced again. Again, this has happened a number of times in my 16 years here. This will probably be the third conversation we have with the school board. There is a meeting prepared or scheduled to occur with Miss Beggs and Mr. Osborne in the school board to talk about their parking concerns. It's always going to be an issue there until that road gets extended southerly, which now we own the property through that woodlot. But getting through a woodlot's going to cause some, we need to get through that process. It's always meant to go southerly and continue to tie in. That will improve traffic flow out there, but until that happens, or until, again, that is going to be something that's funded solely by the tax base because there's nobody there. It's all owned by the municipality. We took ownership of that a couple of years ago. So we're ready to do it. It's just a matter of when do we do it and how do we fund it. So it's the same question that we're having relative to a lot of things. It would solve a lot of problems, but certainly the parking has always been a concern there. And so we are going to try to work with the school board to see if we can figure out something available for them to improve.
Thank you. And I guess my final question, I believe I know the answer, but it's still asked by 3 or 4 residents. The 10th Street development and the way it's been presented by the developer as a 3-generational home, those people feel they had no input on this. They had no, not even a notice of what was happening. And again, if I hadn't read it in Windsor Magazine, I wouldn't know either. I'm sure it has to do with Bill 23, I think it is, Bill Homes Faster. And I would like to know, because when we put that road through, there's no services there and there were certain conditions made back in the 90s. And if those conditions are being complied by the developer, because the road was supposed to be temporary and there's no services underneath there. So whether that requires a report or not, or just a quick answer so that I can get back to the residents involved, we'll figure that their land, that their value, again, is being devalued by at least 10% on over 100 homes. We can all do the math. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I sent out our director who might not be able to. Did you want to, Mr. Mara? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in here through you, Madam Mayor. So just to confirm, you're discussing 10th Street. There's about, I believe, 14 lots or something like that.
That's the first block off of Todd Lane.
Correct. So that process has gone through the draft plan of subdivision with the County of Essex. We are going through the standard protocol. There are some improvements that are required to service that for stormwater, sanitary, and water mains. So those lots will be serviced. They're still working through the draft plan of subdivision currently. But yes, we are going to make sure that those are properly serviced. I'm not sure if there's any other questions you have regarding that.
Go ahead, Mr. Mara.
Yeah, just to build on your comment about them being advertised as a three-generational home. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but again, through the planning and changes that have happened through the planning regime, as you heard today, they may be proposing purpose-built ARUs as part of the initial build, and that may be what they're marketing. I don't know that for sure. I don't know what a three-generational home means. This is the first time I've heard of a three-generational home. But unless Miss Beggs, again, she joined us, so she's probably trying to figure out why I'm answering planning questions here, but they're referencing the 10th Street.
I can try to answer some if you like,
Yeah,
but
no,
I've been told no.
The 10th Street development between Lombardi and Todd Lane, there's questions about them being marketed as a three-generation home, and I'm not exactly 100% sure what that means.
I'm not either. All I can say is that particular subdivision, a phase of that subdivision does have approval to proceed. It has a registered subdivision agreement. We've had some preliminary discussions with the owner. They're looking to change and amend the previous approval that they have. But we haven't had any further discussions, so I don't know what the changes are that they're proposing, or what that will look like. Maybe it will have three generational homes. I like Mr. Mara, I have no idea what that means.
So before we go on, the question originally that was asked was the neighbors feel that they haven't had any input or consultation. And so if you could comment on maybe why they haven't been involved to this point or won't be involved.
So at the outset of that particular application, I believe there was a plan of subdivision meeting that the neighbors would have been invited to. And so they would have been there if they felt like they wanted to be vocal and give feedback on the proposal. Council considered it and they made a motion to approve the plan of subdivision. So if there's an additional change that's contemplated in a new plan of subdivision application that comes forward, there will be another statutory meeting under the Planning Act. It won't be, they have no ability to appeal the decision, but they will be invited to the meeting for feedback purposes.
Thank you. Just to follow up, the three general home put out by the developer, Joe, I can't say his last name, is in the Windsor Business Magazine. He's on the front page, and he explained it. His words is, in the basement, some kids can live there. On the main floor, mom and dad can live there, or the grandparents, and they would live on the third level, and there would be bathrooms on all three levels. That's what he's put out in a written magazine. I'll get a copy of it. I misplaced mine. Usually there's some out in the lobby, but I haven't seen them. And again, their concerns is parking, and what we approved probably 20 years ago was a house similar to what they back onto, being single-family homes and not this idea of, and their biggest concern is, does that now become a rental with 15 people in it? So and they were pretty intense about not having any input. And I said, well, you had it at one point, but this is a new idea by Joe. I think he's with Remax. You know who he is. I can't say his last name, but, you know, him and his son, front page, promoting this. And I guess from my point of view as a counselor, not having to read it in the paper and not know anything about it is pretty upsetting. But thank God I had at least read it somewhere. So that has not been approved then, I'm assuming at this point.
So like I said, we've had some preliminary conversations with the proponent, but they haven't advanced any new applications.
Great, I'll get back to them, let them know that. Thank you.
Questions? Oh, okay. We'll just start here and we'll work our way down. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering for a future council meeting, I'm not looking to put anybody on the spot tonight, but in the fall, I think, a lot of us were here and we received a really big check from our Minister of Provincial Parliament, Mr. Liardi, $22 million. And I'm just wondering if we could get an update as to what's being done with those funds and what's the potential for those funds are. I don't need an answer tonight unless you have one right at the top of your head, but I'll leave that with you.
Thank you. Yes, so that's for the Howard Bouffard Master Drainage Solution. We had already selected an engineer to proceed with the work. We've had one public information center a few months ago. We're having our kind of official on-site meeting tonight as part of the tomorrow night as part of the Drainage Act at the event center. So that's where we send a letter out to any property within that catchment area. And once that's completed, I imagine the engineer will, then spend some months on some design concepts and work through some of the preliminary design parts of it. I would imagine we'll be back with some more Drainage Act meetings, I'll call it, in maybe spring or summer of next year is my best guess. But we are moving along with that as best we can. And it is a large project, so it will take a few years likely to get through, but it is all for that. All that grant money is for the drainage solution. So,
thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just wondering if we could do something for our colleagues in LaSalle, Quebec. With the murder of the Montreal police officer, they covered LaSalle. And ironically, I've had some phone calls over the privilege I've had here from residents, Anglophone residents telling me things that are going on in LaSalle, and me going, you've called Ontario. And I realized that it might not be something we normally do, but I was hoping that you could send a letter to Mayor Nancy Blanchette of condolences.
Absolutely. No problem with that. Councillor Segan.
Just on a lighter note, I just hope everybody had a wonderful Father's Day with their families.
Should have had him go first.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to make a statement that it's just really, actually, congratulations to staff. I attended the Seniors Expo and was shocked with the turnout. Not only from people visiting, but vendors, and what a mix of vendors we had there. So congratulations, because that's only second time we've done it. And I got there right when it opened and I couldn't find parking. I was like, this is amazing. So congratulations. And I did hear several very positive comments from people who attended and really felt that it helped them connect with things that maybe they didn't get the opportunity to on their own. And so congratulations and thank you for that. No other questions or statements? Notices of motion. I do have one. So I bring this forward for the next meeting, and that is a motion to rename Sandwich Park, which is on Sandwich Parkway, to Demore Park in recognition of the significant contributions of the Demore family, what they've done to our community. LaSalle has a long-standing tradition of recognizing individuals and families whose vision, investment, and commitment has shaped our town. And throughout our community, we have parks, streets, public spaces named in honor of those who have played an important role in LaSalle's growth and development. The Demore family has been instrumental in the development of this area of LaSalle, and the neighborhood surrounding the park would not be what it is today without their contributions. So their impact can be seen throughout the community and has helped create the vibrant neighborhood that residents enjoy today. Given the park's location within the heart of the Des Moines neighborhood, I believe it is both fitting and appropriate that this community space be named in their honor. With park improvements already scheduled for this fall, the timing also provides an opportunity to incorporate the new name into the updated signage as part of that work. So I respectfully ask for council support in renaming Sandwich Park as Des Moines Park as a lasting recognition of a family whose contributions have helped shape the town of LaSalle. And do you want me to read the formal part of it? Whereas the town of LaSalle has a longstanding tradition of recognizing individuals and families whose contributions have helped shape our community, and whereas the Demore family has played a significant role in the growth and development of the area surrounding Sandwich Park, therefore it be resolved that Sandwich Park be renamed Demore Park in recognition of the family's contributions to the town of LaSalle, and that administration be directed to undertake all necessary actions, including the preparation and installation of new signage to implement the name change as part of the park improvements scheduled for this fall. No other notices of motion. We don't have a closed meeting to report out, so our bylaws, and it's be given a first, second, third reading and finally passed. And that is bylaw 2026-043, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an extension agreement with John Wesley Evans, Renee Marie Evans, Richard Edmund Janice, and Rosemary Janice. Moved by Councillor Segan, support by Deputy Mayor Capata. All in favor? That carries. Our confirmatory bylaw 2026-044 be given first, second, third reading and finally passed. Moved by Councillor Carrick and support by Councillor Richo Spagnolo. All in favor? And that carries. The schedule of meetings is listed below. Thank you for those who joined us in person and online tonight. Have a good night.